Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. Changing focal length allows a different viewpoint for a given size of subject. This is a useful feature especially with wide-angle lenses. By getting in close it's possible to create a perspective effect on the foreground subject, as I've used in this image. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay. So this is what I've got set up so far. This is just an offcut of a piece of hedge which I've mounted on this C-stand just to give me a good subject which has quite a lot of length in this direction. Now that will be important because what I'm going to do is actually concentrate on just this bit at the very end here. The rest of this is just going to form the background. So to start with, I'm going to be using a standard lens, which is an 80mm on this medium format camera. That's roughly the equivalent of a 50mm on a full frame format camera. Okay, I'm starting off by having a position around here somewhere. So I'll just focus that up roughly. There we are. On the minimum focus distance. So I think I want the camera about here. Okay, so having established that, what I'll do now is just put this on a tripod. Okay, so this is the camera all set up on the tripod. So the next thing to do would be just to tether this into Capture One software so it's easy to follow along and see the results as I get them. There we go, so it's all tethered now and I can show you the settings that I have on the camera on the software here. So at the moment it's in full manual mode. I've got a shutter speed of 125th of a second, ISO 100, and I've got an aperture set of f8. So the next thing I'm going to do is just an experiment. I'm just going to grab an image just as it is with no flash, just to make sure that I don't get any contamination from the house lights. There we are. So at those settings I've got a little bit of a ghost of an image, but nothing too serious. So all the light that I now add will be the only light which is going to affect this subject. So to light this, what I'm going to do is generally light it from above, and I'm just going to use a normal studio flash like this one, just with a reflector on the front of it. So I'll just put that in position. There we are. So that's up in the air like so. Right. So now to just establish a base exposure, what I'm going to do is just use the TTL metering in the camera just to get me in the ballpark. So to do that, I'll just bring up the flash control and I'll just change that from manual to TTL. So with that, what I'll do now is just grab an image and we'll see what we get. Okay, so that's got us in the ballpark. It's not a bad image as far as the exposure is concerned. Now you may have noticed that the flash fired twice. That is because in TTL mode, the first time is to set the exposure and the second time is actually to capture the image. Now with this camera, the flash sync trigger is built into the camera fairly obviously. But on other systems, you have a separate flash sync trigger, and that is where you would set the TTL or manual. So having established the ballpark exposure, what I'm going to do now is just put this back into manual control. So once again I'll just bring up the flash control and we'll just change that to manual. Okay, so what I'll do just to make sure this image is good, I'm just going to zoom all the way in and just check the focus point. You can see that the focus point is about here somewhere. Ideally, it could do to be on the very edge of the leaves, but I think we can live with that for these purposes. Okay, So that's at a fairly nominal aperture of f8, and I've got a narrow depth of field. At this sort of distance, that's what you'd expect. So I want to make the depth of field a bit bigger, so I'm going to use a different aperture to do that. So I'm just going to change that from f8 to f11. Now that might seem like a fairly small change, but again at this sort of distance it will make quite a large effect. So that is one stop, so I'm going to need to add one stop of energy to the flash just to compensate for that. So once again, bring up the flash trigger, select that light, add one stop, and we'll just grab an image. There we are, that's more like the sort of thing I want. If I just go to the previous image, you can see that the background is a bit too far out of focus. And this time it's all been brought in a bit, and this is all sharpened up quite nicely. Okay, but the lighting at the moment is fairly bland. So what I want to do is concentrate it a bit more just on this area. So what I'm going to do is just lower this down so that it's more or less just out of shot, which should be about there somewhere, I think. I'll just check that quickly in the viewfinder. Yeah, that seems to be out of the shot. So with that, obviously I've made this quite a lot closer. I'm going to need to take off some energy. So I'm going to take, 2 stops off that and see what it looks like. There we are. 2 stops off. I'll just grab that again. There we are. So that has made a quite dramatic difference to the whole image. So this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. So by concentrating the light, it's actually taken down quite a lot of the background as well, which is what I want, but it's not quite there yet. So I want to concentrate the light a little more. So to do that, I'm just going to adjust the zoom reflector on this head. This is the equivalent to changing the zoom setting if you're using a speedlight instead of a studio flash. It's the same sort of thing. Okay, so with that now set, that will have again concentrated the beam. So I'm going to take another stop and a half off just to compensate for that. So with that change now made, I'll grab an image and we'll see what we get. There we are. That's made again quite a large difference. This is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. So it's really concentrating around this area, which is what I want. Okay, so we have a reasonable image. But that's, again, like I said before, just with a standard lens. So it's a standard perspective. It's very similar to the sort of perspective that you'd get from your eye. So what I want to do now is change that. So I'm going to change this 80mm lens for a much wider one. So I've swapped that out for this, which is a 28mm lens. Again, this is on a medium format camera, so on a full frame that would be the equivalent of something like a 17mm. But just changing that won't change the perspective. That's only changed by moving the viewpoint. So what this will afford me to do is actually move the whole viewpoint a lot closer to keep this a similar sort of size in the frame. So what I can do is now move the camera a lot closer into the subject, like so. I'll just reframe that, just to get the subject in the center of the frame again. So I'll just refocus that properly. Don't forget, this is the minimum focusing distance. Okay, so with that now done, what I'll do now is grab another image, and we should be able to see the difference in the 2 different viewpoints. There we are, and that's a bit of a dramatic change. So this is what we had with the 80mm lens, and this is what we've got with the 28mm lens. So it is quite a dramatic change. Okay, so there's one or two things to just tweak about the image. I think it's a little bright as it is at the moment, so I need to address that. And the other thing is, I've got a few bits of background just around the back here, which are just distracting from the image. So what I'm going to do is just place a piece of cloth across the background to get rid of those, and I'll adjust the light just in terms of energy, just to take it down ever so slightly. There we are. So with those changes now made, what I'll do, grab another image, we'll see what we get this time. There, that's coming along very nicely, I think. So we've got rid of all the distractions in the background, and it's also got a little dimmer as I've taken some of the energy out. So that's what we had before. This is what we've got now. I'll just zoom all the way in and we'll have a look at the focus. The focus is okay, but I'm right at the very edge of the minimum focusing distance for that particular lens. So what I might do is just adjust the depth of field. So once again, I'm going to change the depth of field from f11, and I'm going to take it up to f22. That should give me a little bit more leeway in terms of focus. Okay, so obviously that's a 2-stop change, so I'll need to add 2 stops of energy to this light. So I'll just bring up the flash control. With that light selected, I'll just add 2 stops. 1, 2. There we go. We'll just grab that again. There, that seems to have done the trick. So if I zoom all the way in now, yes, this is very nice. So it's all quite nice and sharp. Good. Okay, so that is the image now captured. So what I'm going to do now is go into Photoshop and just do the bare minimum of post-production. So here we are in Photoshop, and I've loaded up the file of the image that I captured earlier. So the first thing to do, as usual, would just be to make a duplicate of that. So I'll just go onto the layer here, right-click the mouse, ask for a duplicate layer, but ask for a new document. I will just call it Autumn Leaf. Doing this just gives me that little bit of redundancy. Just click on OK, and Photoshop has made me a new file, called it Autumn Leaf, put it at the top here so I can now just shut down the camera original. I've always got that to go back to. This is what I'll be editing. So, first thing to do would be just to have a close look at the image. So I'll just zoom all the way into 1:1. And just holding down the space bar, I can pan over the image and have a look. I think that's turned out very well. The front is nice and sharp, and the background's going out quite nicely. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is actually look at a crop. So I'm just going to use the cropping tool. Now I've got 16:9 in here because that's what I usually use for video. You just need to pick something which will enhance the look of your particular subject. So I want to actually just put this in the middle and just compress it ever so slightly, something like that. So that's good for the crop. So I like the composition for this. I think this bit at the top here is a little distracting, so I'm just going to take that out. Now the easiest way to do that, since I've got a black background, would be just to add another layer. And just with black selected, I'll just paint over that and just paint it out. So just with a fairly large paintbrush, we'll just get rid of that bit at the top. There we are. So there we have it. So by changing the viewpoint afforded by a much wider angle lens, I've been able to add some drama to this autumn scene. And I think overall that's turned out rather well. Okay, well I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.